This footnote is about weaponized nonviolent communication in emotionally abusive relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like using nonviolent communication sloppily in a way that is actually quite violent.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm reflecting on one of my previous relationships that was very emotionally abusive in ways that other people in our life just did not understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with this guy for 3.5 years. Yep. I was constantly being insulted by him. And when I say insulted, I mean like, he'd call me a dumb cunt all the
Wow.
time. Anytime I did something that he didn't like, he would I found a bunch of racist stuff on his computer one day when I was looking for files to attach to my
Mm.
partner visa application. So imagine
Oh,
that head spinner.
wow.
Um, I was constantly being gaslighted around race issues as well.
Mm.
He and other members of his family were just complete skeptics. They were white Australians, right?
Yeah.
Complete skeptics that race had anything to do with any poor treatment that anyone ever received. It's like, oh, come on. You don't know. You have no
Mm.
perspective on this. Like, why do you think you can try to educate me on my lived experience and tell me it's wrong over and over again? Ugh. It was it was dumb, right? But the
Yep.
way this guy would use when he wasn't being directly violent in his communication, calling me stupid, calling me a dopey bitch, thinking it was a joke. It's like, dude, it's not funny. Like, you need to stop that.
Mm-hmm.
It was very coercive. It was very manipulative. But he would often fall back on this whole notion that when I was communicating my needs very clearly,
Mm-hmm.
saying, I need to be able to come into the house and trust that I'm not going to cop any form of abuse just for being who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Or even as things as specific as I need to know that when I specifically say that I don't have time to make dinner, that you'll help out.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of complaining that, like, if I don't have time to cook, then I need to grab takeaway on the way home and all this stuff, and I need to pay for it. And yeah, well, yeah. I'm not illustrating the model like perfectly here, but I'm ticked off. Um, he would say things to me like in my darkest moments, and this was even before I knew I had PMDD, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's like he could see me in my darkness, and that was like license to attack
Yeah. When
because
you
I was
see the weakness.
defenseless, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
hard for me to defend myself when I couldn't make sense of the world around me in my deep, dark luteal phase.
He could smell the blood.
Or the blood to be.
Time to attack.
Yeah. No, once I start bleeding, then I can usually think a lot clearer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he he would say things like, when I would say, "Hey, when you call me names, it makes me feel really disrespected. Like, it's disrespectful, it's awful. Some of the things you say are very racist, and I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me angry." He would throw out statements like, I can't control your emotions. Like, nothing I say can actually offend you. Like, that's a choice that you make. And this is the kind of sentiment that gets used a lot in personal development spaces. I can't offend you. And while you can have a conversation around that, that points to different ways of perceiving how things are said or things are happening around you in a way that is more, that is less destructive to your own mental well-being. Like, you can have those conversations. This wasn't that conversation. And so many of these conversations aren't that conversation. It's just like, oh, I said something racist? But it's not my fault you're offended, because I can't offend you.
And I guess that's just the, like, intentional misinterpretation of that whole theory of, like, I go with the, they didn't make me feel this way. They did an action that caused the warning signal of an emotion to turn up, which is, because my emotions are my friends.
Yep.
Like, even the bad ones, you know, the warning ones, are there to tell me something's wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
And so they did an action that was hurtful, that does do damage, and my emotion that I'm now feeling is warning me that this need is not being met, that I am feeling abused or gaslit, or that something is not right. So I guess the problem that, like, let's face it, he was intentionally using that incorrectly, knowing full well that that's bullshit.
Yeah,
That our actions do affect the emotions of others.
yeah.
The fact that it's affecting the emotions of others, not creating an emotion because we didn't inject them with a hormone.
Yeah.
Like, that's just a, like, sidestep.
Yeah.
But I guess it's meant to be a thing for a personal. My emotions were not caused by, they didn't make the emotion.
Yeah.
They only triggered it.
Yes.
Is so that you can take control. The way I've put it. Sorry, am I overtaking this conversation?
I don't know. Give me the next bit.
I've put it in this way that if you believe that they actually caused your emotion, you give control to them.
Yeah.
And you are now lost on an ocean with no control of your ship.
Yeah.
But if you remember that your emotions are there to remind you of the dangers or remind you of the things that aren't being met, you still have you're in a storm, but you got a hold of your ship, of that wheel, and you can try and steer it.
Yeah. And the way a lot of people approach this whole idea of like, oh, I can't offend you, the kind of thing, is it's a convenient way of absolving yourself of any responsibility to not be a dick.
Yeah. If you believe that your actions have no effects on others, the level of narcissism, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's broken.
Yeah. He would constantly get on my case about, like, when he did push, and then I pushed back, he would strike even harder, and he would say things like, see, you have no control over yourself. Like, you're too emotional. I can't talk to you when you're like this. Look at yourself. Those 3 words he would say constantly. Look at yourself. It's like, stop telling me to look at myself and try listening to me when I'm telling you very specifically that I need you to stop emotionally abusing me, and using specific examples, and also providing specific examples of what my needs are and what my expectations and boundaries are, and him deciding that it didn't matter. Like, that was a problem that he did not want to address.
He had no interest in what your needs or wants or feelings were.
No, absolutely not.
Which is just, you can't negotiate or communicate with someone who chooses not to
exactly
hear you.
Exactly. So any attempts at nonviolent communication in that context, it's like there was no place for it to stick. Right?
Exactly.
Like, there was no soft uterine lining for the egg to implant itself in. It just got flushed away
Yeah.
like menstruation.
I mean, all communication really only works if the other person has any interest in your well-being and outcomes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's always just this deflection, like, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
That's not how. You shouldn't. Like, it's always just an excuse, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we
Like,
didn't commit
no one-
genocide.
Oh, God. Yeah.
How dare you accuse us of such things?
Yeah. And in the context of like emotional abuse and stuff, it can appear as saying things like, well, no one else has, no one has ever said that I was this kind of person and that kind of person. No one has ever called me manipulative before. No one else has this. No one else has that. It's like, so what you're trying to do is isolate me and my experience and point to it as incorrect because you're comparing it to this like mythical other. And it was disturbing. It was disturbing.
One I used to get was the other direction of like, oh, you've hurt me and I'm just a terrible person. And like,
Oh, gosh.
I'm so depressed and now I'm just can't even do anything.
Yeah.
Or in the attack stance, like, well, no one else will ever love you because, like, look how disgusting you are.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
oh, those are so many.
Yeah. And what's wild about, like, any of those examples is that these are examples of violent communication that aren't necessarily remedied by non-violent communication.
Yeah.
Because of the basis, because of the foundation upon which they are happening.
Yeah. It's a very, it's, I think, quite a limited situations where that structure works. And it can work in, like, it is what they still use in mediation.
Yeah.
That I've experienced.
Yeah.
And that, but it basically, you both have to be like, I agree to trying this method.
Yeah.
And even then, it's not that effective a lot of the time.
Yeah. And then not leaning so heavily on just that thing to be the cure-all for whatever's happening in that relationship.
Yeah, it's meant to just be a way through one tiny problem.
It's one little tool in the big toolbox of life and language.
Unless every person on the entire earth, like, totally committed to, like, this form of communication and were, like, super empathetic, and I reckon then maybe it could, like, solve all the problems. If everyone became a saint.
Yeah. Then even a school child could solve all the world's problems, according to this guy.
But my experience is most people you talk to are not on the same wavelength.
Yeah. I'm just so thankful that, like, meeting Tony was the final indicator for me that, like, I was, beating a dead horse in that relationship, because I was like, oh my gosh, there are people like Tony just hanging out, just waddling around the planet, and I need to give myself half of a chance to find someone half as awesome as this human being. And that's what got me to ditch the other guy finally, because I tried to break up with him once and he didn't let me.
Yeah.
And yeah, ended up with Tony, which wasn't my original intention behind that breakup, because I didn't really know Tony's status and relationship history, but we got together. 5 months into our long distance relationship, we got engaged.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know.
Shotgun.
Yeah, something like that. And then, it was like a year after that we were officially married.
Wow.
I know.
That's pretty adorable. And you guys have been together for how long now?
Married in 2014.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
May 24th, 2014.
over 10 years.
Yeah. Good times, good times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't weaponize nonviolent communication tactics.
And know when to recognize the dysfunctional and violent use of the language around it. Because it is all the time. You see it all the time in politics.
Yeah.
You see it all the time in shitty ass relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't like it. It's not a vibe. It is neither demure nor mindful.
I guess that's when
that whole TikTok trend.
That's when I say fall back on your gut feelings if you can't really place what's not working in that communication. Often your gut tells you.
Yeah.
Run.
And P.S. I'm not advocating for being demure or mindful. That was purely a reference to a viral TikTok video, which I'll link in the comments. Or sorry, in the show notes for this footnote. Anyway, now that I'm celebrating not being in that crappy relationship anymore, I'ma say bye-bye and go continue living my sexy, sexy life.
Yeah, we're gonna say bye to shitty relationships.
That's right. Bye.
Bye.